Waters, and I'll be moderating today. I'm a former middle, high school, and college teacher. I've worked in Cambridge, I've worked in Lawrence, I've worked in Boston. I taught at UMass Boston and just recently Lesley University. My kids grew up here. They were born here, they're Canterburyans from the moment of birth, and they went through the public schools, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. I'm a native of Boston, Dorchester, but I was coming over here at a very early age, sneaking on the trains. My parents didn't know where I was. Anyway, like many of us here, I'm an activist, and I have been an activist involved in the struggle in our schools since way back in the 90s when we had school reform. So we are very, very, very interested in seeing that we get a school committee that's as progressive as we can get, that's dealing with the issues that have come up over the years, so that we can have a school committee and a school system that works for all students. This part I'm going to read. Today we are looking forward to how each of our panelists envisions contributing to that process. Our panelists have already completed a lengthy questionnaire. Did you say it was lengthy? Yeah, it was a lengthy questionnaire. So now we're going to follow up on issues that we got from them, that we gleaned from their answers, some things that we wanted to ask them all in general, and then we wanted to ask each one specifically. This is a, Shelley, this is a panel that we just randomly selected in how you're seated. We'll do what we always do in panels. We'll start the first question going one way, and then we'll go back the other way, and we have 3 general questions. Then we have 1 specific question for each candidate. And if we have time, we have 1 more general question, because we have a lot of questions for you. Okay. Following the panel, our members will vote online. It won't just be people here. It will be all our membership will vote online. They'll get to see this. We've got Robert on video here. They'll get to see this, and then we'll have a vote, and we'll let you know. And those that we endorse will go to work for you. Some ground rules so that we're all on the same page. You've all seen the refreshments. The bathroom is straight down there and to the right. You should have received a program on entering. We're going to stick as closely to the schedule as possible. Stuart will be our timekeeper here, very important person. So you'll have 2 minutes for opening statements first, and then you'll have 2 minutes for each answer. So while you're talking, at some point, Stuart will hold up a sign that says 1 minute, and then 30 seconds, and then 10 seconds. When you see the 10-second one, start wrapping up. Start wrapping up, because when he says done, we might get a few more words out, but then the hook comes in.
The Dorchester comes out.
So you'll also be given 2 minutes for a closing statement as well. So think about maybe what you didn't get to finish saying before Stuart interrupted you, and that might be the time. But before the closing statements, if we have time, we'll do that 4th question. I think that's it. So, did we decide which side was starting? No. We did we? So, here we go. Okay. So, you can just pass this down as you're finished and speak closely into it.
Okay, I just have an information question.
Yes.
Was this the whole set of candidates or only a subset of ones running?
Actually, Carol, do you want to answer that?
Hi. We reached out to candidates initially with our questionnaires, and then some chose to answer, some chose not to. The questionnaires were reviewed by members at an earlier stage, and some people were invited to respond.
Okay.
Is that good?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you to ORC and thank you to everyone for coming out on this nice day. My name is Alechi Cadet and I'm a candidate for school committee. And I'm asking for your number one vote on election day this November 5th. I'm running for school committee because I'm passionate about education and I want to make sure that each student receives the best possible education that the city of Cambridge can offer. I was a student in Cambridge Public Schools. I grew up in Cambridge. I started at the Maynard School, now the Fletcher Maynard. I went on to the Agassiz, now the Baldwin. I graduated from Ringe School Art. I went on to Brandeis to major in business and minor in politics. And currently I'm working as a financial analyst for the Harvard Office of Technology Development, it's right down the street. And prior to that role, I was a grants administrator for WGBH. I want to use my skills as a financial analyst and grants administrator to make a difference in the lives of our students. I sat in the classrooms and many of the problems that were present when I was there still exist today. For instance, there are far too many children on the pre-kindergarten waiting list who are not being served. The math and literacy numbers are concerning, and there is a significant difference in the achievement of students of different socioeconomic backgrounds. These issues are especially concerning because of the financial resources available to the city of Cambridge. As a person who has worked as a financial analyst and grants administrator for many years, I am confident that I can use my skills to address these issues by taking a close look at the budget and addressing the way that our resources are allocated. Thank you.
2 seconds to that.
Oh, good. Thank you, Lindsay. Well, my name is Emily Dexter. I'm a second-term member of the Cambridge School Committee, and I also want to thank all the organizers of this forum, which is a very difficult task. And I also want to ask for your number one vote on November 5th, and I'm going to tell you the reasons. If we're going to have a really dynamic public school system that's always leading the way in public education, we're going to need leaders on the school committee who are raising new issues, asking new questions, insisting on data, and pushing hard for change. And that's what I feel that I've been doing for the last 4 years on the school committee. And I'm going to give you 3 examples. When I first got to the committee, I raised the issue of our elementary school staffing. Did we have enough adults in the classroom? And as a result, this year the administration restored 16 paraprofessional positions that had been cut from the budget in 2011. The second example, I insisted on seeing the data on our special education placements. And in response, the district reviewed every single student to make sure we were not over-enrolling Black and Latino boys in special ed, which is an issue nationwide. And third, I asked questions about our high absence rate, kids who are missing 3-4 weeks of school. And in response, the administration put in more supports for families who are struggling to get their kids to school every day. So those are just 3 examples of how I raised new issues and asked new questions and insisted on seeing data and pushed hard for change. So going forward, I have 4 priorities, which I'm going to tell you about at the end of the closing statements. I hope we're in response to some questions. But I just want to say, if you want somebody who is pushing hard for change and asking for the data and raising new issues, please vote for me number 1. And I thank you very much for coming, and hand it over to Fred.
I actually wrote my statement because I wanted to get a lot into 2 minutes. So I just want to tell you some things that I've done. Number 1, in the 80s, Cambridge had no money, and I was the budget co-chair. We were faced with layoff of teachers, a large number. It was assumed that we would lay off by seniority, last in, first out. If we did it in that way, many of our teachers of color would be laid off. I took the position then that we would not lay off any teachers of color, and in the end, that position prevailed. I was the swing vote, so the pressure was on, and it was very intense. Today, we have the 2nd highest number of teachers of color in any school system other than Boston, and Boston is mandated by court order. Cambridge does it voluntarily. Number 2, I founded our Media Arts program. Our Media Arts facility contains a state-of-the-art TV studio where students learn all the skills associated with TV studio and field production. The idea came to me when I served as president of CCTV and saw how CCTV allowed regular citizens to have a platform to express their views. Grassroots democracy is what I call it. I wanted to make sure that every kid had the opportunity to learn these skills. If our kids were going to change the world, they needed these skills. I founded the City Scholarship Program along with Ken Reeves. I've always believed that sometimes the smallest amount of money makes the difference when one goes to college. Since the program inception in 1993, the city has awarded over 1,000 scholarships totaling about $2.4 million. My family has also created a scholarship program for the last 25 years, giving a CRLS student a scholarship to Bentley College. Vocational education. In 2004, there was very little interest in vocational education by the superintendent and the school committee, and the few programs we had were not certified. Nobody believed our students were interested. I decided to test that theory, visiting every 8th grade in the city, explaining vocational opportunities available at Minuteman Vocational High School. That next September, and this was exciting, the buses rolled and 175 kids left Cambridge to Minuteman VoTech and getting an outstanding vocational education. The problem was it cost Cambridge $7.2 million, and guess what? Needless to say, it got everyone's attention, and very soon after that, school committee invested heavily in creating the quality 13 programs that we have today. I don't usually talk about things that I've done, and that's why I did it. That's exactly the way I read it. Perfect.
So, good afternoon. My name is Jose Luis Rojas. I bring passion, community, and leadership to the 2019 school committee election. I want to thank again Revolution for inviting me and my fellow candidates to this panel. It is my honor to humbly introduce myself, give you a brief background on where I come from, and the outline of my platform. In the next couple of minutes, I'll touch on those issues. And I just want to say that if elected, I will bring the perspective of an immigrant and an English learner to the school committee. Our district has a lot of families that are non-native English speakers, and at this moment, our school committee doesn't have that representation. On top of that, obviously, I do believe that I have professional background that will provide additional value to the school committee, and also have a record of community involvement and education. And so why am I running? I'm running because I really care passionately about what education does for kids and the opportunities it opens for them. In my case, I come from my upbringing. In Mexico, my parents took my brother and me to bilingual schools in Mexico so we could learn English. Later on, they took a risk and they moved to the U.S.-Mexico border so we would improve our English. And that education that my brother and I got in Mexico and in the U.S. opened a lot of opportunities for us. In my case, I was able to get financial aid as an undergrad student, as a Mexican undergrad student, to study here in the U.S. And later on, I was able to earn a master's degree as well. So later on, I hope to touch base on more of my professional experience and how it's relevant to the school committee. And I look forward to hearing about your questions and give you more information and hopefully get your endorsement by the end. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aisha Wilson, and I'm seeking your #1 vote for school committee. I'm also happy to have your #2 vote. Thank you. The reason why I'm running, I'm a kid from Cambridge whose K-12 education was established here in this great city. I grew up in the Jefferson Park housing development, and my mother, shout out to my mom who's here, as a single parent of 3 girls, really did all that she could to support myself and my sisters. Unfortunately, she was not able to help in funding my college education, and so I didn't go to college straight out of graduating in 2000. I worked in the city. I worked with the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program every summer for about 7 years, and I worked in our youth centers. And through those experiences, I was able to heighten a lot of equity for our young people, especially our students of color and from disadvantaged communities. Then I was motivated and encouraged by mentors in our city, Sue Walsh from the Department of Human Services, to actually go back to school, and which I did. I went to the Urban College of Austin, got my associates, and then to Wheelock and received my bachelor's and my master's in social work in 2013. From that time now, I've been working at the high school with a program called the Workforce Program that's part of Cambridge Housing Authority. I've been there for 5 years, and it's great to be in the high school, but I also see a lot of the challenges in terms of how our young people are transitioning into our schools and how they are transitioning out. And that's why I'm running for school committee. I'm running because I want to make sure that our young people have equity and equitable access to education so that all of our young people can be successful. And so I would love to have your #1 consideration on November 5th. Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Weinstein. I'm running for school committee. If elected, I'll be a new member. And of course, I ask for your #1 vote. I also hope to earn your endorsement from Revolution Cambridge. My wife and I have lived in Cambridge for 18 years. Our kids are now in 2nd grade and 7th grade in the Cambridge Public Schools, where they've been for their entire education. And I'm proud of our city and of our schools, but not satisfied. How do we in Cambridge achieve educational equity and close persistent opportunity gaps without sacrificing the rich and joyful education experience for every child? How do we ensure that every one of our children will succeed after graduating from Cambridge Ridge and Latin School, in school, in college, in career, in life? As a child, I entered public school with many advantages, and I did well academically, loved my teachers, made lifelong friends, and hated school. I didn't have enough agency, and I saw disparities in opportunity all around me in my diverse hometown, which this fueled my lifelong commitment to closing the persistent racial and opportunity gaps in our schools and to advancing educational equity while ensuring all kids have that joyful, enriching school experience so they can succeed on their own terms, both before graduation and after. I've pursued these goals as a public school teacher. I taught primarily high school, also K through 12, for 5 years at the start of my education career, as a scholar of education policy at the Harvard Grad School of Education, and as a program leader in mission-driven organizations with an educational mission, and now for about a dozen years at Brandeis University, where I'm leading a national civic engagement program for undergraduates. And most importantly, as a Cambridge Public Schools parent and advocate. So I've had literally hundreds of conversations with families around Cambridge. I've run several times, and through that process, I've really gotten a much broader sense and deeper sense of the challenges that we face, and I will be reaching out throughout my term, if elected, so that we're not only relying on people who come to us, but that we are making sure we have a full picture from the experts who wake up every morning to bring their kids to school or to work in our schools. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that gives people a good idea of, or somewhat good idea of who you are. I'm going to start down this end again just because these people just spoke and they need to rest their throats for a minute. So, question number 1, and I'm happy to read it a few times as I go down there so that if somebody kind of forgets what it is. When you are elected, what 2 projects would you prioritize first and why? What are the obstacles to accomplishing these priorities due to the way CPS is structured? And what would you do to overcome them? So I'm going to read that again because there's like 3 parts to that. When you are elected, so see, we're very positive here. What 2 projects would you prioritize first and why? What are the obstacles to accomplishing these priorities due to the way CPS is structured? And what would you do to overcome them?
When elected, the 2 projects I would prioritize are, well, we all know that we have a significant achievement gap that exists within our school system. And research has shown that early education, pre-kindergarten, has been a proven tool to helping close the achievement gap. One thing I would prioritize is expanding early education opportunities to all our families and students. We currently offer 3 early education programs with the capacity for 90 students. The waiting list has students, over 500 students who are not being served. What are the challenges? Well, say the challenge is space. As a school committee member, I will work with our city council to make sure that when developers come into the city and they want to build, we have an early education center negotiated for negotiating community benefits, for example. Another project I would prioritize is free tutoring for all students performing through the lower grade level. Tutoring has been an effective tool in helping children reach their potential for decades, and the data proves it. Unfortunately, it can be expensive, and not all families can afford it. So, free tutoring for all students performing below grade level. And if I have enough time, so I'll talk about one more priority: putting more teachers in classrooms. Currently, in kindergarten, there are 2 teachers in the classrooms at all times. So, for example, if you have a classroom and a student is having a challenge, one teacher can go while another teacher teaches to keep the class going well. But after kindergarten, that's not the case. So those are 3 priorities.
Thank you, Leche. Learning a lot about all of the candidates today. So I have 4 priorities. The first one is math education. I think we need to work hard to raise math achievement for the obvious reason. We live in the 21st century. It's a critical skill, and I think that we need to do more math education. And I talk about we need a Marshall Plan for math, and I think there's a lot of things that could look like, but we need to really focus on math. The second one, like Leche, I think we need actually more teachers in our classrooms, more paraprofessionals, more guidance counselors. We have, at the high school level, the guidance counselors have caseloads of over 200 students, and I would like to see, in particular, schools need more staffing. Number 3, preschool, after school, and summer programs. And we all are always talking about early childhood education, but I think we also really need to think about summer programs and after school, because a lot of learning happens then. And number 4, and Fred and I share this, I really want to see a systematic internship program at the high school, more real-world learning opportunities, where every student participates in a well-designed internship outside of school that's matched to their interests. Those are my 4 priorities. And I'll tell you, there's one obstacle to all of these things. All these things require human time to organize, et cetera, or to pay for programs. And there's a misconception in Cambridge, maybe some of you also hold it, that we spend too much on our schools because we spend more per pupil than most other districts. But I have a very different view, which is that we don't spend enough on our schools. If you think about what we spend, which is about 27, 28,000, a private school spends about 40,000, 50,000. So I've been advocating for years, even before I came onto the committee, for more staff and more higher budget as a percentage of our city's very wealthy budget, and I will continue to advocate for that as one barrier I see to some of these programs that I'm talking about. Thank you.
Well, let me took my idea. So vocational education is really important to me. Right now, Cambridge has 13 very strong programs, but there's actually about 50 Chapter 74 programs that kids can take. So we're shortchanging kids from those 13 to those 50 programs. For example, we don't have really an electrical or plumbing program at the high school. So one of the things that I would like to do is to expand opportunities for kids to take vocational so they can earn a family wage, and we know that that is available in vocational education. It will take money because there's charter schools that kids can go to and the school system pays. But guess what? There is no vocational charter school in the state, so kids can get locked in by only the programs that you have there. We have to make sure that kids have opportunity for vocational education. The other thing that I would like to focus in on is giving kids more college credits while they're in high school. I've visited several school systems that actually get to the point where they're actually offering kids almost up to an associate's degree before they graduate from high school. Imagine having 2 years off on your college tuition if you do that. Now, all of this takes, as Ms. Dexter just said, it takes a lot of time. It moves us away from a really important district strategic plan that the school system has. But these are issues that are very, very important to me, and I hope to get a committee that will work with me to make these outcomes real.
So could I just make one request, which we didn't think of in advance? This is also being audio taped, and if you would just say your name before you speak, we'll figure out what to do about the people who are listening. But if you would just henceforth say your name before you speak, that would be very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. My name is Jose Luis Rojas. So I'm answering the question about two positions. I guess the first one I would try to tackle is try to make the school committee discussions being more effective. I think right now what I would do is I would work with us, with the other school committee members to agree on a code of conduct to make the discussions more respectful and productive. The challenge that we face is that school committee members have various different points of view. They're all passionate about the issues that they want to discuss and address, but I think we need to be be grown up and agree to disagree in a respectful way so we can have constructive discussions. The other area that I would like to focus on is equitable access to early education opportunities, whether it's preschool or kindergarten access. And so, I mean, the challenge that we have, as you know, is budget and it's also space. There's not enough space for those programs, and the budget needs to be allocated. So I think one of the ways to address this is by having a joint task force between the school committee and the city council. This is not something that the school committee can fix by itself, so I would push to have those conversations between the two bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Aisha Wilson, and two of the projects that I would love to put forth if elected or when elected is definitely to partner with our colleges and universities for those tutoring opportunities that we can actually bring in college students to actually help with and pair them up with our young people, whether at the middle school level and going into high school, so that our young people can actually have the support of a college student, think about what college may mean or look like, also have the opportunity to get the tutoring support so that they can be successful. I think as some of our individuals, our members here have talked about, candidates, have talked about around thinking of free tutoring services for our students. We have the Cambridge School Volunteers, which is a great program, but we need to see that enhanced a lot more. We need to see more volunteers actually come up, but I think this is where we can partner with our colleges and universities to improve those efforts and initiatives. Also, as some of the candidates have mentioned about universal pre-K, thinking about how we can actually tackle our achievement gap and get our young students into the buildings a lot sooner. As we know, some of our students of African American low-income families, more disadvantaged families, are not able to afford the private preschool program, the daycares, and so for those reasons, those students are not coming into school until 5 and 6 years old. And that has really proven, and the research shows, that those students have been more at a disadvantage as they are transitioning through school. And as we see our MCAS scores, it really shows that our students do not have the supports that they need a lot sooner. So I think that if we bring them in sooner, if we can really partner with our community partners to have more vouchers, more opportunity, that would definitely be something that we can overcome. Also thinking about pathways for students on the college career track, thinking about the hands-on learning. I think Mr. Fred Cantini has also discussed how we can support our students, and I know that we need to do a more robust job at that. Thank you.
Well, my name is David Weinstein. There are a lot of things that I'd like to do. I also come at this with my overriding goal being to move the needle in the direction that we need to go. There's a lot of important things that need to be said, but none of that matters if no progress is made. So I am determined not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good in that context. I will focus on closing the opportunity gap as a lens by which all policy is considered, even though not all policies will directly address it. We need to continue to dismantle structures in our schools that unintentionally replicate and reinforce structural racism. The de facto tracking segregation that's happened in some subjects in the high school, I think, is a prime example. With few exceptions, classes should be taught heterogeneously. I grew up in and taught in a diverse public school that took that approach, but few families and teachers have that experience. And it's been shown to benefit all children, those currently struggling, those currently excelling, and those in the middle who aren't being targeted by efforts to support those other groups of students. It is counterintuitive to the way that, to most people who haven't experienced it. Teachers do need to support to develop their capacity to develop their pedagogy for that. But we can't have classes essentially segregated by race and expect to close opportunity gaps. I also support other initiatives to support our teachers, including common planning time, which I know from my experience as a teacher is really cool, really crucial and cool actually. Both within the school, but also across the schools amongst grade level or subject area. It's something that we need to, I think, consider as part of the proposal to extend the school day. We also need to meet and exceed our goal of 30% teachers of color because of all the benefits for all of our children. And I think a key aspect of that that's been an issue here in Cambridge is retention. In recent years, we've lost some excellent teachers of color. Some are new teachers, which can be challenging in itself, but not all are. We can't expect these teachers, whether new or veteran, to somehow be responsible for solving all that ails Cambridge that intersects with race, and to do so as an added unpaid responsibility on top of their other professional responsibilities. We need to build a culture that supports and implements and those supports varied needs of our teachers of color. There's more to say.
Okay, again, thank you very much. I am going to start back with you so you don't get your rest this time. So this is general question number 2. Some of you have identified as barriers of educational opportunity to some students external factors such as homelessness, hunger, transportation, and punitive attendance records and policies. What would you propose to do in order to address the effects these factors have on students' educational experiences? And I'm going to read it again. And again, if going down the line, someone wants it read again, I'll be happy to do that. Some of you have identified as barriers to educational opportunity to some students external factors such as homelessness, hunger, transportation, and punitive attendance policies. What would you propose to do in order to address the effects these factors have on students' educational experiences?
David Weinstein. Thank you for bringing this question to the Education Forum. A lot of these factors are not isolated in the classroom, but they have an impact in the classroom, and we need to be thinking about it. What I feel we need to do is to better connect our schools. A lot of great things happen, but we need to better connect our schools with other city initiatives, local organizations, and community efforts. We don't actually take full enough advantage of the resources available to us in near Cambridge. I think there's a lot of factors for that, but we have been and can be again on the leading edge, but also we need to make sure that we're lifting up efforts that are happening in our schools amongst teachers and support those, but also that we are actually receptive to and able to take advantage of grants, community organizations, and as a body, like the school committee, and I'm really happy that a number of other candidates here specifically mentioned this, that we work closely with the city council, because issues like housing, hunger, are issues that the school can best address in partnership with the city, because people in our schools have knowledge and expertise that's relevant, and people working in other city agencies and in other community organizations have that. I also think, related to something that was raised a couple of times before, I think we need to connect our students and our alumni with the extraordinary opportunities we have. Opportunities which remain out of reach for many of our kids. And I think the factors that were mentioned in the question in terms of homelessness, food insecurity, a lot of these factors contribute. Not everybody is able to have the supports that they need solely coming from the home. So we need to support these kids, our kids, through college and career guidance, through internship and apprenticeship programs, through mentorship and other supports. We have some of that, but we need a lot more, a much more robust program, and it continues to follow and support our students after graduation, because that's not where it ends for us, and that's not where success ends.
Thank you. Aisha Wilson. Many of these barriers are definitely what will cause our young people to suffer throughout their schooling experiences, especially as you see your parents struggling at home to either put food on the table, to pay their bills. If you're dealing with homelessness, there could be substance use or abuse issues. We need to have more social emotional learning for our teachers. As a social worker, we need to see our students as the full picture, see them as the whole child. This is critical because when our young people are in our spaces, if we don't know what's going and what's happening and what's affecting them when they leave our building, we are not going to be able to support them in our buildings. And so if we're able to think about the social emotional learning and equipping our teachers with that, that would be really helpful. We need to also partner with our community partners. And so like our youth centers and our local after-school programs, we need to think about how we're building on collective partnerships with those places so that our young people can have more resources and more adults in our spaces that are actually supporting our kids, not only as being mentors, but being resources and advocates for our young people as they are challenged with various things on a day-to-day. I think we also need to think about how we are addressing these issues around homelessness. And so, as Dan said here, we need to also think about our collaborations with Cambridge Housing Authority and our housing programs in the city. We know housing is a crisis in our community, affordable housing is a crisis. And so if our young people are very scared and nervous about where they're living and what food is coming on the table, we cannot expect our young people to be in a classroom and actually learn any basic concepts. And so I think that those are some of the issues and challenges and external factors that really affect how our young people are going to process and feel like they can be scholars in our classroom spaces on a day-to-day. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Jose Luis Rojas. So as my colleagues on the side have already mentioned, I mean, I would say the first step is to make sure that people are being directed to the right resources that the city has. So as a school district, we can probably do a better job in pointing people to those right resources to address whether it's housing or food, etc. That said, I mean, these are really hard issues to address. So in the short term, they're not going to go away. So the reality is that kids are going to come into the classroom facing those challenges, and it's going to affect their learning. So I think we need to start by making sure that we have what teachers are calling a culturally responsive teaching practice, which means basically teachers need to acknowledge that they have, well, not just teachers, we all have biases. When we see someone, we assume certain things, that they're acting up or they're not paying attention because X, Y, or Z, and be able to address those biases and really respond to them and really try to understand where those kids are coming from and address each of them as individuals and treat them as best we can.
Thank you, that's a great question. So I'm a great believer that children need to come to our schools. They need to be emotionally, intellectually, and physically safe and comfortable when they come to our schools. If they're not at that level, then we've got to make sure that we can get them to that level. The City Council has been very, very helpful to us this year in providing funds for free breakfast and lunch programs in our schools. The City Council has been very helpful with us in providing free bus passes to our children. So Ms. Dexter and I were supportive of those efforts and encouraged that. So that's a very good thing. So we get this issue. I think we have natural partners with the Cambridge Health Alliance that we work with. We've increased budgetary support through social workers in our school. And so wraparound programs are very, very effective. The King Open School has, I think, a state-of-the-art after-school program that maybe should be replicated in all of our schools to provide the support. Programs like Andrew at the high school provide an example, I think, how this works really well, and that twice a week in the evenings they bring families and children together to talk about issues that they have and they can work together. So I think this is a very serious issue, and I'm glad that you raised it, and and we've made some inroads into that, and we need to do better. We have assessments now that focus in on these issues. We have summer programs. And it's it's hard work. You have to be persistent to overcome it. And I look forward to working more on this issue. My name is Fred Fampini, by the way.
Emily Dexter. So some of the things that you were mentioning were factors that are not directly under the control of the school committee. For example, homelessness. And I think of homelessness and hunger are obviously poverty related. And as Fred said, we've really been increasing our social workers with this wraparound model of education, which I think is being considered statewide and probably nationally. Because when a child goes to school, the whole family goes to school. We hope, because I know as a parent myself, I was very, very affected in my adult development by going to having my children enter the public schools. So we've been trying to increase our social workers so that they can connect parents to services that they might need. With something like transportation, again, this is an issue that also affects the MBTA. It particularly affects the high school students because we have students who are very dependent, particularly on the number 69 bus, which is irregular. And I've been looking into could we provide school buses for high school students, and how much would that cost? Because I think that might help with that. And in terms of punitive attendance policies, we set up an ad hoc committee on the high school attendance policy, which is called Attendance Violations, AB. And I was the chair of that ad hoc committee. And at the high school, if you are missing a certain number of days without an excuse, or you're late too many times, your grade gets dropped by 1 grade from an A to a B, from a C to a D, etc. And we felt that this was too punitive. So we actually convened a 2-year task force on this, working with high school administrators, teachers, and parents, to put in a system where there was much more process between the student missing time unexcused and what the consequence was. So a lot of that was about discussion, students discussing with their dean why they were late or why they were absent. And if it turned out that those were things that were outside the control of the student, or it had to do with going to their parent's doctor's appointment to translate, that those types of excuses would be excused. So we've really narrowed down the students, number of students that are getting penalized. Thank you.
Alexi Cadet, and I'm going to touch on hunger first. I want to commend the school committee for expanding the current lunch program. Going to effect this year, if you qualify for a reduced lunch, you get a free lunch. And I think we can take a more progressive approach where we offer a free lunch to all students regardless of income. Why? Because, say for example, to qualify for a reduced lunch, you need a household income of $40,000 and a certain amount of children. Well, if you make $40,000 in one sense, you don't qualify for a reduced lunch. In working with students over the summer, I heard students talking about this particular point. There was a child, a student, and one day their parent forgot to pack lunch or give them lunch money, and they went through that day without eating lunch. And it made me wonder and realize that the face of hunger is not always apparent. And well-fed students are better students. I don't want our children in Cambridge falling behind because they're hungry. With our resources, I believe that hunger is very preventable. And in terms of transportation, a student did a study where they found that there was a bus from a lower income neighborhood in Area 4 versus a bus in a higher income neighborhood in North Cambridge. And in North Cambridge, there were more buses on this particular route. The children were quiet and they were focused. And in Area 4, on this particular bus, there was only one bus. It was always late. It never arrived on time. And the students were crammed in there like sardines. Now, when you have this tied to an attendance policy, children may be arriving late to no faults of their own. And to fix this, I would say let's look at maybe providing school buses. We're working with the MBTA to provide more buses.
Okay, again, thank you very much for your responses. General question number 3. How should CPS include parents with limited time and resources in CPS decisions? What can and should the school committee do to facilitate this? So I'll read it again. How should Cambridge Public Schools include parents with limited time and resources in CPS decisions? What can and should the school committee do to facilitate this? And if anybody needs me to repeat it, I will again. Anybody? Okay. How should Cambridge Public Schools include parents with limited time and resources in CPS decisions? What can and should the school committee do to facilitate this?
I'll let you get that. So this question is near and dear to my heart. I grew up in Cambridge. We moved here because my mom was a Neiman Fellow, and I lost my father at 4, so my mom had to raise 2 boys by herself. And in order to do that, she worked 3 or 4 jobs. She never came to my basketball games or my chess tournaments, but she always made time to come to my parent-teacher nights and anything school-related. But for other parents, that wasn't the issue who were working 3 or 4 jobs. And it wasn't an issue because many of them didn't have the time or they didn't feel comfortable speaking to a school committee or a superintendent. So how can we include them? Well, we should strive to hold school committee meetings at different times on certain occasions if there are big decisions. Instead of having it on a Tuesday at 5, maybe we have it on the weekend, and we go to places where we know that would be more accommodating to certain individuals, for example.
Good, thank you. This is this is probably the toughest question that you've asked, and I know our district is focused very much, and has for years really been focused on family engagement. And I think has done some really great things, and the question is how can we build on that? So one of the things that we've been doing is the city has what's called the Community Engagement Team, and this is a small group of individuals from the community that speak different languages and are from different cultures that are represented in Cambridge. And we've done a lot of work using the Community Engagement Team to have these folks, they're outreach workers essentially, to go out and to communicate with parents, to try to get them to be able to attend events. I think we could do more, for example, preparing, giving parents transportation to school events and things like that. But I think we're already doing what I would call outreach. We have family liaisons in all of our schools, which is really unusual, and they do their best to establish relationships with all the schools. And I think the one thing that I would really like to see, based on experience that I've seen, is a parent school, about a place where parents could learn about advocacy skills, could learn leadership skills, could tell us what would be the best way for us to engage diverse parents. Most parents don't have any time to engage, and I can tell you most parents in Cambridge are not engaged in decision making. That probably describes 75 to 80% of families are pretty much coming to events and they're not on their school councils, they're not coming to school committee meetings, etc. So I think we need to engage all families and think of some kinds of incentives that would make people feel that when they speak out, their voice is really listened to.
So I view myself as a full-time school committee member. Most people think I work 24/7, which is what I love to do. So I am everywhere in Cambridge. So I've knocked on over 7,000 doors already. That's how I campaign. So I go to the parents. I go to those people that can't get an events. I talk to them all the time. I get invited in for tea. I have great conversations with them. So I am a full-time school committee member. The other thing is that I've been pushing the development of school apps in our schools. I think, I visited schools all over the country all the time, and school apps like Remind is one of them that communicate with parents all the time. And so it's a great opportunity where parents can communicate with the school, with the teachers on a regular basis, and we are doing a trial basis on that. Ms. Dexter pointed out the community engagement team. That was a motion that Mark McGovern and I brought in to make sure we had community engagement teams, and they have proved to be so much more successful.
No, it's fine.
Much more successful than I could have ever imagined. And we have a strong core of parent liaisons in which we're, in our budgetary, have increased them to close to the full-time than in the past. And I think that one of the other things that we can do is, I remember when the commissioner was the police commissioner, I saw him sitting at the 1369 coffee shop, just sitting there with a cup of coffee, and everybody that came in, he introduced themselves. So I think maybe we need to have our superintendent and some of our leadership team go to those places where people attend and try to engage in conversation. So it's important to give those people voice, it's important to give those people power, but it's more important that we listen to them and that we respond to their concerns. Thank you.
Hi, this is Luis Rojas. Again, it's a good question. Again, probably very hard to address, and I know that we, as a district and even as a school council member, we've been trying to address it in our school. I guess one thing is some schools do better at that than others. So, one is lessons learned. If some schools are doing better than others, are there ways that we can learn from each other? The programs that you've mentioned that have been implemented, I'm sure that, again, some schools are probably doing better than others, so try to learn from each other and try to implement those in different schools. As a school committee, we should be holding the district accountable to monitor how those programs are being managed and if they're being successful or not. And if they're not being successful, then coming up with new strategies. On a personal level, I think we all have a role in that communication, whether it's talking to our neighbors, as school committee members. In my case, I would be going to at least one school council meeting of our 17 schools. And I know that not all parents are represented there, but that'll be one starting point. And I would definitely touch base with the family liaisons and have those conversations as well.
Thank you. Aisha Wilson. I think we need to definitely have conversations with our parents to see exactly what it is that they need. What will be actually beneficial to them so that they can feel more included and feel more engaged and involved in our meetings and a variety of things that are happening within our schools. The school council meetings through the high school actually happen every single month. There's one meeting a month, and every 3 months they're happening in different locations. So the first 3 months they happen over in the Windsor Street Health Clinic. The second 3 months it's in the principal's conference room at the high school, and then the last 3 months is at the Jefferson Park Housing Development. And so that has a decent turnout, and with the partnership with the workforce program, we encourage our families to actually get to each of those meetings, and we encourage them to go based on the topics. We also are in partnership with the family liaison at the high school, Greta Hadina, and supporting her around topics that are most beneficial to our families, and that's really important. We also need to think about how we can provide childcare for our families at our school council meeting, our school committee meeting. This is critical. In order to actually get parents to come out, especially parents who might be single moms or working several jobs, just how can we actually provide childcare if they have young children so that they can actually be and have a seat at the table and be able to voice their opinions. I also think that our parent-teacher conferences can actually move around as well and think about how we can partner with our neighboring communities to actually allow our teachers the flexibility and opportunity to actually go into communities to actually meet with parents. And I think that this will really help out, and I've heard firsthand from parents that I work with that this would be super beneficial and they would take advantage of that if this is possible. Some of our guidance counselors are great. They've actually come out to our workforce sites at the 3 different locations that we have in our large housing developments, and they actually meet with our parents one-on-one. And so we need to include that, and I think that that would be a great way to tackle some of these issues. Thank you.
Could you repeat the question, just so I'm sure I'm still on track with?
Yes. How should Cambridge Public Schools include parents with limited time and resources in CPS decisions? What can and should the school committee do to facilitate this?
Thank you. Okay, my answer is still the same. This is David Weinstein. There is no one answer. This is a priority. We tackled this when I was a parent representative on the steering committee at Granite Parks Elementary School, where both of my kids have gone, and one still is, the school council for Granite Parks. Families have different challenges and resources, and also different cultural expectations of how that homeschool interaction takes place. So we need to take that into account. Also be sure that we're not unintentionally shaming parents for the way, and other guardians for the way that they are interacting, but that we're facilitating appropriate ways. Family liaisons are a key asset and underutilized, I think, by CPS. They need support and clear goals for from CPS for what we're doing with this program, so that we can make sure that it's consistently, achieving what it can. There's really wonderful people in those roles, and I've benefited from them. Not every parent or teacher, many families and teachers have been generous with their time, right? School committee, coming to meetings, etc. Not everybody can do that and share their perspective in that way. I will actively seek out regular updates from every school, both through established arrangements like school councils, but also through engaging with community organizations. I do think that, as was I think alluded to by Aisha and by others, I think we should move some of those school committee meetings to other locations around the city, and also make sure that notes and videos of those meetings are promptly and easily accessible. Not just for those meetings, but for, in general, translation services are important, and I think we need more support. There's more need for it. I will visit each school during my term, and when particular concerns are raised or have been identified, seek to observe and meet directly and meet more intensively with those affected. I think the bottom line is CPS taking responsibility to proactively connect and find creative and new ways to do that, because the people who are able to and to come to us should be heard, but they're not the only people who are impacted, and we don't get a full picture, and we can't make really effective, good policy without going beyond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to go to the specific school committee questions for each one of you, and I am going to start with David. Okay? David, you mentioned heterogeneous grouping in classrooms, innovative teaching, and quality as factors that contribute to making the educational experience rich and joyful. Can you talk about what initiatives you would take to achieve this as a member of the school committee? Do you want me to repeat that?
Thank you. So this is David answering a question for David. There's a lot to it. A key part of it is building capacity in our schools and our teachers. As I mentioned, heterogeneous grouping is not often the way it's done, and it's often not the way our teachers, excellent teachers, have been prepared to teach. So it's developing their skills and pedagogy to teach in that way. That's part of it. I think it also is a staffing issue, and ensuring we have that rich and joyful education, ensuring that we have enough staffing for the arts, for music programs, for enrichment of all sorts, and that we are not targeting those aspects of education only at some of our kids, that is seen as central to part of the education process. And it's not as a sort of, oh, well, this is a nice thing that we're going to provide to some kids. It's really been shown to really support academic success and life success. So I think it's kind of a win-win situation. You know, and also as we look to this proposed extending of the school day, I think that we need to be really looking carefully at what we do at that time. And sometimes just a few minutes here and there over the course of the week can make the difference for the social emotional learning, especially at the younger grades. A few movement breaks, having a lunch and recess time. I feel like both of my kids will really be angry with me if I don't put them in plug every morning for more lunch and recess time. But it actually supports their learning and their development as people, which also supports their learning. So these things all build on each other. I feel like there's a lot more to say about this. I know I've almost had a time in it, but I do think that we have a lot of this wisdom in our schools from our teachers, and also it's out there. We just need to be asking this question and using those resources to focus on doing this in service of our goals.
Okay, Aisha, for you. You suggest that Cambridge Public Schools would benefit from internal teacher-to-teacher mentoring. What role could you play on the school committee to succeed in implementing this? And can you recommend some other structural changes that would improve our schools? We can do it again? Okay. You suggest that Cambridge Public Schools would benefit from internal teacher-to-teacher mentoring. What role could you play on the school committee to succeed in implementing this? And can you recommend some other structural changes that would improve our schools?
Thank you. Aisha Wilson. I believe that with teacher-to-teacher coaching, it can be super beneficial, especially being seen as a mentor. If we have teachers who have been in our schools and teaching, I think all of our teachers are super great. And we have some great teachers who are veteran teachers and who can really teach and help to support and coach our new teachers coming in. And I think that through that, we'll be able to build more of a community and a collective of teachers and educators who are working together to support our students at the end of the day. I think that through that process, as a school committee member, I would like to also support how that process plays out. And so making sure that we're getting feedback in terms of how we're coming together, if it's one-on-one, if it's in group settings, if there are some forums that we do with our teachers to really get the feedback in terms of what they need in order to be successful as educators to our students. I also believe that we can build on our partner universities, I think in particular like Lesley University, and really think about how we're coaching them and how we're playing on the education that our teachers need, or their kind of like their CEUs, their teacher certifications throughout the year and throughout the summer. I think if we're able to really be strategic in that process and also really work with them so that they're getting what they need, that we'd be able to satisfy our teachers and really support them so that they could be more equipped to support our young people. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Jose Luis, you are a parent who is active in your school council. As a school committee member, what would you do to ensure that Cambridge Public Schools administration more comprehensively includes school councils in decision-making? What problems in CPS would this approach help solve? I'm going to read that again. Okay. You are a parent who is active in your school council. As a school committee member, what would you do to ensure that Cambridge Public Schools administration more comprehensively includes school councils in decision-making? What problems in CPS would this approach help solve?
Thank you very much. Yeah, as I said, I am a member of the school council right now for our kids' school, and so I've been part of that for 7 years, and so I have seen year after year, I guess mostly through the budget process, how schools have to advocate for themselves every single year to the school committee to understand why they need X, Y, or Z. The school committee usually looks at numbers across the board, and they're saying, well, if you're getting about the average amount of resources at any other school, why should you get more, right? And I think what we need to understand is that each school faces specific challenges. I mean, it's depending on the population, it's depending on the structure of the program, for example, a bilingual school, not a bilingual school, etc. So I think as school committee members, we need to understand that while it's appropriate to have district-wide numbers or targets for how we allocate resources, that we also need to be conscious that allocation might need to change slightly from school to school. So I think as school committee members, I think we have we would do a good service to all our schools by paying attention to the individual needs of each of the schools and balance that act of district-wide numbers versus individual numbers per school and still being fair to all the schools.
Actually, you are next. Sitting right next to you. So Fred, you talked about working with the community and Leslie and offering paraprofessionals a route to higher education opportunities so that they might transition to full-time teachers and retain in the school system. How's that going? In what ways, if so, if not, how would you proceed to achieve this goal?
Well, that's a great question. So my goal is to work with, is to create a pipeline for paraprofessionals because close to 50% of our paraprofessionals are people of color, and so to me the best way to help improve the teaching force, to create more teachers of color in our teaching force is to try, is to take our current paraprofessionals and provide them with a bachelor's and master's degree. And so I've met with Leslie University, and I have to say the Cambridge Teachers Association with one of their teachers has been really wonderful and really is the expert in this and working with me. And so what happens in Cambridge, believe it or not, is there are a lot of teachers that have student teachers work for them, but they have they're not interested in taking courses at Leslie University. So there's this pool of unused vouchers that paraprofessionals can access them to. And so the goal is to create a pathway, not only at Leslie University, but with other universities that will allow paraprofessionals to get their bachelor's degree. And then we have another program that Dynamic Diversity Department has worked with, which will help provide some support in taking the tests. So I have to tell you, it's a slow process. We're making a lot of progress. I love Leslie University, but it is a bit of an organic structure. And so, you've got to be patient, and there's a lot of good people over there. And I actually think Leslie University should be our prime partner in a lot of things we do in the Cambridge Public Schools, because they're a great educational university, tops in New England, and with the new president there, they really want to be supportive of Cambridge. And so we'll more to report on that later, but I think it's a great concept. Fred Fandine.
Thank you for that. Emily, Cambridge Public Schools has not done an adequate job of hiring or retaining teachers of color. Attempts have been made to recruit teachers and find ways to support them. These attempts have been met with some but limited success. What ideas do you have to improve these efforts and move us closer to accomplishing this goal?
For one more time.
Okay. Cambridge Public Schools has not done an adequate job of hiring or retaining, specifically, teachers of color. Attempts have been made to recruit teachers and find ways to support them. These attempts have been made with some but limited success. What ideas do you have to improve these efforts and move us closer to accomplishing this goal?
So just to give some numbers, right now, 25% of our teachers are teachers of color, and as was mentioned, 50% of our paraprofessionals are teachers, are educators of color. So we have a district target of 30% teachers of color. That's a somewhat arbitrary target, and I actually think it's, we shouldn't have a target in the sense that why 30%? Why not 60%, which is what our student body is? So I think our goal should be just to keep diversifying our teaching force as much as we can. We have affinity groups for teachers of color, and that they can meet and support each other, which I think is really important. I think the best thing we can do is make Cambridge a really great place for everybody to work, so that we are extremely competitive when teachers of color and white teachers want to work here. Teachers of color are much in demand everywhere, including in the suburbs where there are not many students of color. So we have to be really, really competitive, and I believe in small class sizes, lots of planning time, decision-making power at the school level. I think just the main thing is to make this a great place where teachers of color want to come. That's the short answer.
Thank you, Kyle. Alexia, you point out that in 2018, 40% of African American and 49% of Hispanic students in the Cambridge Public Schools were reading at grade level by the 3rd grade, compared to 73% of white students. You proposed free tutoring to address this, and you spoke about that earlier. What other ways within the framework of Cambridge Public Schools can this gap be addressed? And what would you do as a school committee member to make that happen? Can you read it again?
No. That's a great question. My vision for Cambridge Public Schools is that we have a strong bridge. We have a strong pre-kindergarten program available to all of our students. We have a strong K-5 program. And then we have a strong middle school. And we finish with a strong high school, followed by a strong system that tracks what students do and where they wind up after college. Now, in terms of those data points, I discovered that, yes, less than half of African American students and Hispanic students were at reading level by grade 3, compared to over 70% white students and Asian American students. Why the difference? Why so early? I believe it's the access to pre-kindergarten programs. Wealthier families, high-income families can bypass that. They're on the waiting list because they can afford to pay for private pre-kindergarten programs. But if you're a family of lower means and you have to leave your child at home and they're watching cartoons while these other students are receiving the academic education already, you're going to have an academic gap at the kindergarten level. And that's why it's critical that we have more than one teacher in the classroom beyond kindergarten. Again, because if you have a student that may have a challenge learning, one teacher can work with that student or that group to address that academic challenge while the teacher continues to teach and support the classroom. And free tutoring, making tutoring available to all of our students, especially students who come from humble backgrounds. It would be very beneficial. Thank you. I'll let you do that.
Thank you. Guess what? We have time for general question number 4. We have, you all stuck within your time limits? Okay, here it is. The next school committee will decide on appointment or reappointment of a superintendent of public schools. What criteria would be most important to you in selecting a superintendent? Do I need to repeat that one? The next school committee will decide on appointment or reappointment of a superintendent of public schools. What criteria would be most important to you in selecting a superintendent?
I'll let you do that. One criteria that is my priority is that we raise academic standards and expectations for all our students across the board. Let me give you an example. One of my priorities is adding resources to the innovation agenda, 6th through 8th, and here's why. If you look at the math scores for 8th grade, in 2017, only 10% of African American students were mathematically proficient. In 2018, that number rose to 30%, and get this, the target for 2020 is 25%, less than what was previously achieved. You can argue that the numbers are rising, but what message does that send to our parents? And as a black candidate, that's embarrassing. Now for white students, that number was in 2017 70%, in 2018 77%, and in 2018 the target was 75%. Again, why lower the goalpost? I would demand of our superintendent, that when we achieve success, we build on it and we continue to raise educational standards and academics for all of our students across the board. Thank you. I'll let you do that.
Okay, Emily Dexter. So I think you're asking what are the characteristics of a good superintendent, in my opinion. So the first characteristic, I would look for somebody who's accessible to students, to parents, and to educators. So this is very important for that superintendent to be able to relate to everybody that they're overseeing. The second thing I would look for is somebody who has vision, but not too much vision. And that's what I mean by that is we've had superintendents come in that have their own vision, and they've more or less imposed that on the community. But we want somebody who has some vision, but part of their vision is really representing what the Cambridge community would like to have. So somebody who's, and that's part of the accessibility thing. Number 3, very important, being able to work with the school committee in partnership with us, and also in the sense that we are the community, we represent the community, and understanding what our role is. And the third one is somebody who really advocates to the city for the resources we need. We need people who go to the city manager and say, this is what we're trying to accomplish, these are the resources we think we need, and we are a wealthy city and we would like to benefit from the wealth of the city. And I'll just give you one statistic, since I harp on resources and dollars, which is really translates into people and materials. This year is a very typical example of how the budget works in the city. We received on the school end, we received per student, because we're having a big increase in population, we received a 2.6% increase in our budget. For the rest of the departments all combined, received a 7% point increase. So almost every year, the school department falls further and further behind the rest of the city, and the city budget is going up like that, and the school department budget is going more or less like that. So just by last statistic, in 2000, we were 35% of the city budget, now we're only 30%. So I really want a superintendent who advocates for the resources we need.
Thank you. You know, I've hired, I think, 12 superintendents of schools, so, you know, trying to close the achievement gap, persistent achievement gap has always been a top priority for me. I'd like a superintendent now that is really strong in developing district improvement plans and has a success rate for making sure that resources are allocated to that district improvement plan. I'd very much like to have a person of color who is our superintendent. And, you know, as Ms. Dexter said, there's a partnership that the superintendent has to be a partner with the school committee and with parents in Cambridge to be able to fulfill his mission. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Luis here. I would start by agreeing that we should be looking for someone with a diverse background, whether that's personal or just their experience working in diverse backgrounds. I mean, as people have said, we need to be looking for someone who has proven successful track record working in similar districts to Cambridge, facing the same challenges that we have here. And not only that, I mean, as Emily said, we don't want someone that comes in with a formula that they want to apply. I mean, we also want someone that that's willing to be creative on how they address the challenges that they find when they come to the district. And then finally, I mean, I think by default, we're probably gonna hire someone really smart and that has all these things, but in the end, as has been mentioned before, we need to hire someone that we feel that we can communicate with and work with. And I'm not presently involved in education, so I would love to learn more on other things that we should be looking for someone. For that all, thank you.
Thank you, Aisha Wilson. I personally believe that a superintendent's job is to make sure that we are progressively moving the academic achievement gap, so that, especially in a place like Cambridge, where we're super progressive and we have great, rich resources in our city, that the vast majority of our kids are not failing, and that our kids are actually making it through school and actually moving on into post-secondary opportunities and becoming successful. And whatever success is and looks like for them. But we need someone who has some kind of proven track record. We need someone who actually has the vision of saying how we're going to move our city forward. Again, because Cambridge does have some rich resources here, and we are able to put a lot of dollars up for the education of our young people, the numbers, the proven numbers that we have just do not equate to what we're actually, the money that we are putting out there. And so I want to see that our superintendent definitely has the ability to advocate for all of our students, is definitely pushing forward initiatives to bringing more teachers in our classrooms, bringing in more social workers, more guidance counselors into our spaces, into our buildings, bringing in more reading and math intervention specialists in order to support our students who may be failing or may be behind or need that extra support. We need to advocate at the city level, as some of my fellow candidates here have said, because that's the only way that we're going to get that money and the only way that we're going to be able to really push the needle. In terms of accessibility, I want to see that our superintendent is in our communities, that he's having or she is having lunch meetups with our parents and with our community to talk again about how we're going to address some of our needs in our community. That's critical. As we talk about accessibility, it's not just an email. We need to see him or her. We need to see them in our spaces. We need to know that they are fighting for us. And that's what I hope to see in our new superintendent.
I'm David Weinstein. Oversight of the superintendent is one of the key responsibilities of the school committee, so I think it's good that we're talking about this. If we don't renew the current superintendent's contract, and I think we need to follow best practices to ensure the strongest pool of applicants in the search. This is a place that should be a dream job for the right person, and there are really exciting people out there if we feel the current superintendent isn't meeting our needs. What I'd be looking for a current superintendent is the same thing for an applicant. Expertise, clear values that they can also be an effective spokesperson for. Also, evidence of, to use, teacher speak, working well with others, and can show that they've achieved results. If not here, it's a new person in a context that is relevant. And understand our complex city, even if it's somebody not from our city, and understand our community, beyond taglines, beyond reputations, with the reality. I think classroom experience and experience at various levels of education is an important qualification to seek. And I also feel that an overriding goal should be of a superintendent should be seeking to move Cambridge along on our journey to closing the opportunity gap, to having classrooms be rich and effective, to improving the lives of all of our kids. Too often education leaders seek to kind of make the mark. And they get started on that, and then they move on, and they're followed by somebody else who seeks to make the mark. There's a great book called Spinning on Wheels that talks about this. And the district is left kind of churning through initiative after initiative without ever fully following through on any of them, or making a thought-through evaluation that no, we don't want to follow through on this. We need to change course. So it's stepping in to a journey that we're on and ensuring that we are continuing or adjusting path in a long-term way with a focus on not waiting for kids because they can't wait. Those are my overall pictures of it, and I think we need to take that responsibility of oversight and potentially hiring very seriously as a school committee.
Okay, so
Aside from your closing statements, that concludes our panel. So we're going to give you 2 minutes each to make your carefully thought out closing statements. And then we'll talk a little bit about what happens next.
Hey, I'm David Weinstein. Again, I still David Weinstein. I still want your #1 vote, and also the Our Revolution endorsement would be an honor. I have a lot of plans and information that's on my website, and you can also reach out to me at any time. A few that I'll highlight. Overriding goal of closing the opportunity gap, while, as I said, ensuring all learners have the support that they need. From those with exceptional challenges to advanced learners to those in the middle who are targeted by current initiatives for advanced learners or strategies aimed at children who are struggling academically. Offer junior kindergarten and pre-K for all. Closing those opportunity gaps. Budgeting for enough hearts and hands in the classroom and in our schools, including the still new upper schools, through equitable, not necessarily equal, student-teacher ratios with a solid baseline for everyone. Support for the family liaisons, hiring enough social workers and specialized staff. I'm excited that there's a social worker candidate. My mother is a social worker, and I believe strongly in what social workers achieve. In addition to meeting and exceeding that goal of 30% teachers of color, as we implement this new strategic plan, evaluate a longer school day, make sure we're guided by the wisdom of our teachers, our families, and the best available research. Common planning time for teachers. Testing, we have a full accounting of the testing and assessments that are happening in our district to make sure that we're not piling redundant tests. There are some that, at least in the short term, we may need to keep in place, even if we don't want them, but there are some that are going to be excessive and we can get rid of right away. They're not serving the needs of our students. I'm going to leave you with the thought that I am a parent of children in our school right now. I can't believe my daughter's already in 7th grade. But she's still got a number of years to go, even though it feels fast. My son is in 2nd grade. I've been engaged with public education and in the thick of this for my entire life, even after my own public education. And have knowledge and experience of how to connect the classroom with the knowledge that's out there in our community and in the field to help all children succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Aisha Wilson. And again, thank you all. Thanks to ORC for bringing us all together, and I really hope to have your endorsement. Again, as a kid from Cambridge and being in this great city, I know a lot of what our city can do, has done, and can do with the support of robust, progressive candidates, school committee members. And I am confident that if we're able to get more teachers into our classrooms, really bring in more social workers, really think about how we are pushing the needle on supporting our students to really reach their highest potential at every level, from thinking about universal pre-K, our elementary schools, our upper schools, and within our high schools, thinking about our college or career track and really strengthening those avenues so that our young people can be successful. This is how we're really going to move our city forward, and this is how we're going to see our numbers increase in terms of more students of color actually reaching higher marks after graduating. I think that, again, we're able to do this. My slogan is "Together we are better." And I think about that as a collective of our community. It's not just our parents, it's not just our teachers, it's the community as a whole. It is with our community partners. It is with all of the stakeholders in terms of homeowners, those people who pay tax dollars into our education, all our stakeholders, and how our city needs to support our young people to be successful. I really truly hope to have your #1 vote on November 5th. You can learn more about me at www.voteaisha.com and catch me on all social media websites. Again, thank you all for your time.
Hello, hi, Jose Luis Lopez, Villarreal. So I've enjoyed the opportunity to be part of this panel, hearing your questions, being able to answer some of the issues that you brought up, and also hearing the answers of my fellow candidates. So I just wanted to reiterate that I believe that my professional experience, along with my personal background, made me well suited to be a school committee member. So I'd like to cover my personal background, my professional background. So as was mentioned, I'm a member of the school committee of my children's school for the last 7 years, and I'm currently the co-chair as well. I've also been finance chair of cooperatives and nonprofit boards, and through that experience I've also learned to challenge groupthink and to come up with creative solutions and to seek accountability from leadership and management. As far as work that pays me, over the last 20 years I've been working in community finance. Through that work I've developed skills to communicate and collaborate with people of diverse backgrounds, whether people from low-income communities or people in corporate boardrooms. I've also learned to arrive at solutions with my clients through various means, whether it's discussing financial statements with a work-from-home business or understanding a community's socioeconomic challenges and opportunities. I've also learned to value various cultures by working in the Americas, Africa, and Europe, and that also includes working with organizations and businesses here in Massachusetts. And I think these are all skills that any school committee member should have. And I would say that equally important, I want to state that I'll be dedicated to invest significant time to be involved, to be an engaged school committee member. I will be working part-time in my side job. And so I hope that this information has been helpful and that you'll choose to endorse me by the end of your meeting, and that I'll get your number one board member pick. If you have questions, I look forward to answering them after this forum or the days to come. My website is voteforstlouis.org, and I just want to remind you, when you're looking for passion, community, and leadership, vote for President Luis Rojas, VFA number 1. Thank you.
My name is Fred Fantina. I just want to say that I think you can all be pleased with the budget that Emily Dexter and I were co-chairs of the budget. And it's a budget that was a $10 million increase. It was an increase of 59 positions. And I think both of us, and I thank Ms. Dexter for really pushing hard for more staffing, because it's been really helpful. Again, 59 new positions, but 33 of them were really focused in on our strategic goals, which I think is really important, and our goals were based around equity. So I think we can be real pleased that we were able to keep this focused and apply resources to where they're needed. Just want to share some stuff. I don't know what perceptions of people who I am, so I'm just going to say I'm single. I have no relatives who live in Cambridge. I raised the least amount of money of any incumbent, and certainly per vote. My father never finished elementary school. My mother just finished high school. My dad worked 51 weeks a year. Family never took vacations, but we had a great and lovely family. I run a one-person campaign. I do not have a website. I don't use Facebook. I simply knock on doors from January 1st, ending in November, 7 days a week. If anybody needs your help, it's me. So I hope the exchange we had today will be helpful in helping you make your decision. Thank you.
So Emily Dexter, and I'm just going to use my last time to just tell you a little bit about myself, and then also talk about why I think your vote is so important. So just, I was raised outside of Washington, D.C., but I've lived in Boston and Cambridge my whole adult life. I have 2 children in my 20s, in their 20s, who went through public schools K through 12. Professionally, I've always worked in education and educational research. I started my career working as a literacy and language specialist at a very progressive school for deaf students out in Framingham. Then I went back to graduate school to study educational research, and I had professional research positions at the Harvard Ed School and at Lesley. So that's just a little bit about a background. So I really have tried to marry the personal experience I have of the schools with my professional experience. So in terms of why the vote is so important, I think of the public school system as a foundation of almost every city, really. And the problem we have in Cambridge is our public schools are almost invisible to most of the people who live here, because we have so many people who are either single or they are no longer involved in the schools and they're older. So it's a real challenge to get people interested in the public schools in Cambridge. But for me, they are the foundation of our entire democracy. It sounds really corny to say that, but I truly believe that, and that's why I'm very committed to public education. And I think we just really need to be focusing on that. So I hope you'll use your number 1 vote carefully and wisely, and think about who you feel like is the most important person. But I also want to say there are 11 incredibly excellent candidates this year. Only 6 of us are here, but there's 5 other candidates. So I don't think you can go wrong. I think we have a really strong group of committed people. Our schools are on the move. We have a superintendent who's very committed, very skilled. We're trying to make a lot of changes. We have been making a lot of changes, and we want to continue with that process. Thank you.
Alexia Cadet. I currently spend most of my time crunching numbers for Harvard. When elected, I plan to spend most of my time crunching numbers for the city of Cambridge in order to move this district forward. In closing, Cambridge is home to world-renowned universities like Harvard, MIT, Lesley, and I truly believe Cambridge should be home to a world-renowned public school system. Cambridge currently spends over $25K per pupil, and the approved operating budget for FY20 exceeds $200 million. The school committee needs someone with the experience and educational background to help properly manage these funds. I need your #1 vote on November 5th, election day, so that I can use my skills as a financial analyst and grants administrator to make sure that our resources and your tax dollars are used in a way that maximizes the potential and educational outcome for each student. In addition, I wrote a paper called A Unique Opportunity for Cambridge Public Schools. It was published in the Cambridge Day, and it was published in the Cambridge Chronicle. If you haven't already, please look it up. Again, my name is Lachie, and thank you.